starting in a way. You're already, you know, this is great because what happens with these is two people really talking, and you two are doing that already without a sort of a forced feeling to it. But let's do a little bit of welcoming in the almost more formal way first, which is to say to everyone who is joining us from all the places, and it's quite an array of places. Many of you who are joining us from 9 p.m. or even later, where you are, on behalf of my colleague Karen and all my other bookstore colleagues at Elliott Bay Book Company, which is here on Duwamish land in the city of Seattle, we're delighted you're here with us this evening. What's a beautiful early evening in Seattle, where Shary Flenniken, who is the reason we're having this program tonight on the occasion of this publication, I would say it's not long awaited because this book no one knew this would ever happen, I don't think, but it's long in coming is the word. Book of her cartoons from the 1970s and 80s that were in the National Lampoon, Trots and Bonnie. And she will be in the wonderful presence, virtual presence of Sarah Glidden, who did the honors of this sort just a few days ago when we had Daryl Cunningham. And in some of our visiting already, there's been a little bit of geographical back and forth as Sarah lived in Seattle for a few years in recent times and moved back to the East Coast achievement one way, where Shary, who grew up in Seattle and then left for many years and is now back, but they can talk about circles of life and different directions taken. This book, Trots and Bonnie, which just came out and has caused all sorts of excitement because it comes from an extraordinary period of activity in the culture and in the publication, especially the pages of National Lampoon, which played a real part in with a pre-internet, pre-cable TV, pre-many-thing force in the public imagination, especially youthful imagination, and humorous imagination, are inclined towards looking at things a certain way. And this cartoon strip featuring a teenage young girl named Bonnie, her dog Trots, and a sidekick named Pepsi, who feature in many of the stories they do, were about 18 years of this incredible part of National Lampoon. And it's just now that finally they've come to be in book form. And I think that'll get talked about tonight. I will say that the publisher of this book, I mean, there are a lot of people doing really good publication of graphic work. And the publisher of Shary's book is the New York Review of Books. It's got a comic book imprint, but Shary's work probably would never have been in the pages of the New York Review of Books. If you know the book review publication, they don't run comics in them. It's almost the other way, kind of highbrow. But they do great books. They publish great books and they bring back and all sorts of interesting voices. So tonight, Shary and Sarah will talk. I think you may get to see a little clip from Trots and Bonnie. Sarah, I will point out also, besides being someone who's lived in Seattle and is now back in Brooklyn and living in New York, is herself the author of two wonderful books, the most recent of which is Rolling Blackouts, which I think she was living in Seattle, or at least she came into Seattle. We did a program at Elliott Bay, and How to Understand Israel, which needs even more understanding right now in 60 days or less, which is her prior book. That's good to have that. Thanks, Shary.
Shary, how did you get the Vertigo edition? Oh, sorry.
That's fine. Like, oh, where'd that come from? The Travels in the World Books and People will be part of tonight. So also I'll say about Shary's book, it includes the comic strips themselves. It includes an introduction by Emily Flake, who's herself a significant figure. And there's a printed interview with Shary, which includes photographs of from over the course of her life. So there's a lot in this book. The cartoon strip alone, the cartoons alone would be a lot, but there's even more as people are beginning to see as they pick this book up, which we have copies of at Elliott Bay, and we're including beautiful signed book plates that Shary has done. So that's also something to get when you get a copy from us. I will disappear here shortly, but also to say, besides the wonderful comments you've been putting in the chat, if you would also, as we go along, and certainly toward the latter end of an hour, put questions in for Shary or Sarah, but Shary is especially as with this book and with these stories, and I've already been seeing bits of memory pop in the comments too, of where people were when reading these in their earlier lives, in all of our earlier lives. So with that, again, for all of us at Elliott Bay, thank you for joining us. And now to say, please enjoy what you're about to have happen, and welcome virtually and with good attention, Shary Flenniken and Sarah Glidden. Thank you both.
Thank you, Rick. Hi,
Thanks,
Shary.
Rick. We're here.
I know. I'm so
Hey,
excited to be talking to you.
I wanted to say something about New York Review of Books and New York
Mhm.
Review of Comics, because Lucas Adams and Gabriel Winslow Yost are two guys who were working at New York Review of Books, and they loved comics. And so this is like a publishing, they do a lot of graphic novels, and it's like a labor of love for them to do that, and to find people that need to be published or that they love or whatever. They're really, it's just they're really doing a good job of filling a gap, I think.
Yeah, they're really gorgeous books. And I was curious, how did you and New York Review Comics find each other for this book? Because I know that a lot of people had been asking, when is there going to be a Trots and Bonnie collection? And now here it is. Can you tell us how that happened?
Yeah, partly it was, on my part, it was timing. I had to make a living. And so I had day jobs and things like that, and things that kept me busy. And I just spent 5 years taking care of my husband with Alzheimer's, who died in just the very last Christmas of 2018. And so it just, the timing wasn't right. And frankly, nobody wanted to do it the way I wanted to do it, which was to add commentary. Because I felt like these comic strips really needed an explanation. And I could have written a chapter on each one of the strips, about where it came from. So that, that was part of it, that I was able to do it the
It's
way.
a commentary.
Yeah, I focused group that too.
I love
asked
it.
some fans, it's like, what would you think if I wrote about, what the strips were about, just wrote some prose. And they're like, oh yeah, we're curious to know what the heck you were thinking. So that worked out. And then I was so lost after my husband died, and along came Norman Hathaway, who I've known since he was a teenager, just a talented teenager. And he did everything for this book. He talked to Lucas and Gabe. I don't know, he hired a photographer to come photograph all my artwork. And I dragged it out of the basement and got it all, and she shot it with her Nikon. And he designed the book. And the guys at New York Review of Books, they did a really interesting thing to the black and white line art. And I know I've only seen your work that's in color.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that you don't have to concern yourself with. But I just learned that they actually have to do this process of taking your black line. So for me, in my work, it's always, even when I do color work, I used to separate the black line from the color in order to get a crisp looking black line, like that was a solid black and not a mixture of the 4-color process, which would be mushy, and then it would be out of register, and it would be even mushier. So they do this thing, and apparently printers know about this, where they take your black and white. Am I like getting too detailed? Because I really
No, I want to hear it.
So they take
everyone does.
your black and white photographed line art, and they have to, I think they have to put it into grayscale, and this is like in Photoshop stuff.
Yeah.
Put it into grayscale, and then they make a bitmap, and then they clean up the bitmap. And the reason is because the line is like, like your black line on your color work is going to have that nice softening gray tone along the edges of the black line if you looked at it like with a really like a loop or a microscope. And And so, but that just turns in, that doesn't look good. So they wanted either black or white. And so that is what the people at New York Review of Comics art department did with every one of those pages. So those pages look better than they have ever looked, ever.
I mean, the book's incredible.
Yeah.
I gotta say, like, it's a beautiful book. So like you really have a lot of color ones when it comes to the later years, and they start giving you more pages
Yeah, they did.
in National Lampoon. You're like, wait, she's really good. More of this.
Yeah.
So these strips were from 1972 to 1990. That was the Trots and Bonnie years in the National Lampoon, correct? Yeah.
Well, in I think it was 94, Lampoon got sold. I always say this, Lampoon was sold to the guy who made Dorf on Golf, which was some kind of like little movies with right now I'm blanking on the actor's name. Really funny guy who used to be on the Carol Burnett show. And he did these funny things where he would stand on his
Tim Conway, we're getting in
Tim
the
Conway,
chat.
yeah. He would kneel down and then he'd be like golfing and really, it was funny.
Oh yes, I
but
remember.
It was like, it was not really Lampoon humor, but what the thing was is that they wanted to buy the name. They just really wanted, they didn't care about the magazine that much. So, and it just tanked after that. So changed, tanked, disappeared, didn't get printed very often.
Yeah.
So no offense, guys who did Dorf on Golf. I don't really know you personally, but
you blew it.
Miss the magazine because we had so much freedom. We could do anything. We could do
and you really did. And so I have so many questions. I don't know where to start exactly. I'm like, start with your childhood. But I keep just, when I was reading these strips, because they're so feminist and they're so like edgy, and I keep thinking National Lampoon is like for like teenage boys, basically. And you're doing this stuff for them. And like, as you say in your interview, like in the back of the book, like you felt like you were educating them. Like, how did it feel like writing for this kind of audience? And do you feel like it would have been different if you were doing this comic strip for Ms. or another magazine that wasn't 18 to 25-year-old guys?
I actually went to Ms. when I first started working at Lampoon. I went up to Ms. magazine, and I went to the ladies' room with Gloria Steinem.
I was hoping you would talk about this.
So, and I told her, I said, you know, like women are doing comics in San Francisco, where I just come from, and there's a thing now that is happening with women's comics. And she said, yeah, I really love Wonder Woman, which was drawn by a man. And I was speechless. I didn't know how to respond to that. And my impression, I mean, this is specifically of Ms., and I don't have anything against Ms., but it was corporate. I mean, Lampoon was corporate in a sense, but it, you know, they weren't really very courageous or you know, into doing anything new and to doing anything that was really challenging. That is my impression. They fought the good fight, so that was a good thing. But as far as like my comics, I don't think so. Apparently, I am describing myself as inappropriate now. You ask me about my humor. It's inappropriate, and it still is. It's just the stuff that I like. Well, but you're seeing this now with Sacha Baron Cohen being inappropriate. I just howl at his stuff, and he is like the most inappropriate person I've ever seen in my life, and he's hysterically funny. And so it's not really a bad thing. it's not a bad label anyway. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but the Lampoon was really right for somebody like me. And in terms of being a female, I'm now describing myself as a person without a penis. So I'm a PWP. And so if you wanted to know what it was like to be a person without a penis working around people with penises, it sort of just, we were all just people. Persons. We were persons. And they were PWPs too, because they were persons with a penis.
That's true.
So it was totally, you know, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
John in the chat is saying that speaking as one of those teen boys who read the magazine, he learned a lot about girls from Trots and Bonnie because he'd look at anything that had naked girls in it and he got educated accidentally. So you did the good work. You taught them about periods, about, you know, like awful things like rape, but that I think boys don't really hear about from a woman's perspective. And so I think that that's really incredible. And maybe we should start. Did you want to show some of your strips before we really get started here? So that anyone in the chat, anyone here who hasn't read the strips yet, or might be new to Trots and Bonnie.
I could show the very first Trots and Bonnie that I ever did.
Yes.
And I have to make sure my tech is in order here. So bear with me. I have to share the screen, share my second monitor, click on share.
It's working.
Click on. And don't come back till you're wearing a bra. No, Trots, I won't give up yet. I've got an idea. I'll just tie my hanky like this. Might as well hang yourself. So you're gonna try to humor the old beaters, eh? And take this smut with you. Where to now, oh hope of the world? So, okay, so you could, let's see, stop share. Boy, I didn't know how to draw my own characters at that point, but that's okay. It was the muscles in my hand were not developed. So as I continued to draw, the muscles in my hand allowed me to make the lines that I could do now, or that I could do.
You're a little too hard on yourself. It looks great. And the look, you know, when you read these, they look like these old comics from, like, you know, the beginning strips of American comics. Can you talk a little bit about how that came to be, how you drew this? I mean, like, I want to go back to like Air Pirates and how you got hooked up with them in San Francisco, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, but I want to point out that in that comic strip there, that was in a comic book. That was in one of the Air Pirates related comic books. And but the book that her mother throws out after her is The Dialectic of Sex by Shulamith Firestone, which was a really important feminist manifesto at the time. And Shulamith Firestone, she was only 23 when she wrote that. It's like 20, maybe 25, but I'm thinking 23. She was really young when she wrote that. And it just was an important book. And I got to throw that into my comic strip. So that was like, those were the thrill part of it. And also I got told, I went to visit one of my girlfriends and her mother told me to not come back until I cut my hair, because I had long hair, because I wanted to look like Cher. Yeah, she told me that. So it really was coming from, yeah, she was the Lutheran minister's wife who told me that. So, you know, these things came from somewhere. They came from events and attitudes. So, but I connected with the guys who were going to become the air pirates at Sky River, at the last Sky River Rock Festival, I think. And we were there, I'm thinking we were there for 10 days. It was a long time. I think it was two weekends.
And where was this?
Between. I think it was Washougal, Washington. It was right on the Washington-Oregon border. And it's somebody's farm. You know, we got a permit to throw a festival there, and it was huge. I mean, it was like the space was huge. Yeah, it was neat. And I had gone down with some people that worked on the underground paper that I was working on. And there was this guy I loved, Maury, who was a dwarf. He had worked for NASA, doing graphics for NASA, and now he was working on this underground paper. And it was so convenient because we had a Gestetner, what are they? The printing machines. And it would fit in the back of this pickup truck with a kind of a roof on it. And Maury was perfect because he could fit in there and run the Gestetner machine. So we were turning out little newspapers for the rock festival. And so
you were making a zine pretty much about the festival as it was going.
Yes.
That's amazing.
And so these cartoonists and these guys were working on the Berkeley Tribe. Dan O'Neill had been doing what we would call an overground, regular comic strip for the San Francisco Chronicle for years. And Gary Halgren had been doing wonderful sign painting here in Seattle. Like, you probably don't know this, but Gary Halgren and Doug Fast had a company called Splendid Sign, and they brought back the classic sign painting designs from the past. And it was like people who were doing posters were doing the same thing. They wanted to use all those nice, turn of the century designs and things. And they put Rainier beer signs on like barns around here, and just really made Seattle a more beautiful place. And so Gary was there too, and he was looking into becoming a cartoonist because he wanted a purpose in life. And I mean, everybody was
If you want a purpose in life, become a cartoonist. Everyone knows that. I
thought Dan made a lot of money, so I did not know. But there, not very much money was a lot of money then. So, and so I think everybody was kind of motivated in different ways, but a couple of the guys, Bobby London and Ted Richards, came back up to Seattle and worked on my underground paper and newspaper. And it was really fun because, I mean, it was a newspaper. They would do some color and you could put your art in it and do your comics. And it's not, even other newspapers, alternative papers, are not the same as what we were doing back then.
Was this Sabbath, the paper that you were doing?
Yeah.
Someone is asking in the chat what it was called.
Yeah, Sabbat, which is from the root of saboteurs, which are the people that threw the wooden shoes into the machinery in Holland.
Oh,
So the anarchists would do that. So they were I wasn't really that in that area of politics, but they were true anarchists, the people on that paper, until we were taken over by Weathermen. So it was quite the drama there. Anyway, so Ted and Bobby and Gary went back down to San Francisco and hung out with O'Neill, and O'Neill had this warehouse, and they started hatching this plan to pick a fight with Walt Disney, which they were really successful at. And there's a whole ethic around that. There's a book by Bob Levin called The Pirates and the Mouse, which really goes into, that is like the mouse case is you can look it up on, you can Google it, and what you'll find is a lot of people's like master's thesis for their law school or something, that because it's a classic fair use case. And Disney shouldn't have won, but of course they were Disney, so they sort of did, but O'Neill.
So the idea was to copy Disney cartoons and like break the copyright laws or bend them.
Was our idea to do that?
Yeah,
to
the
break
Air Pirates.
copyright laws? Well, it wasn't so much that, it was that Walt Disney, Walt Disney was corporate America. They were a sign, or they were actually part of American imperialism, taking American culture and foisting on other countries. And there's a lot been, I'm trying to think of the name of the book about it. Richard, anyway, it talks about Walt Disney as a corporate monster. And so, I thought that was what we were doing. I thought we were fighting the corporation. And, but these guys, I married Bobby London, and when we went home to his parents' house and I saw the bedroom of his childhood, Minnie Mouse was painted like 100 times bigger over his bed, on the wall over his bed.
Wow.
So they were like obsessed by these characters. They'd grown up with them. And Dan wanted to go to jail for drawing Mickey Mouse. He thought that was really funny. So, it was 1971 and everybody was smoking hash, and it seemed like the possibilities were endless. There was an insane war going on at the time, and people were fighting that, and we fought everything, and we felt like we could win, I think.
You got to try, right?
Well, things changed. The 70s were really incredibly cool.
Yeah. You say in the afterwards that the Air Pirates, you started doing this kind of cartooning as based on improv theater exercises of copying old-fashioned comics and making your own thing with them. Can you talk a little bit about that? And is that where Trots and Bonnie came from? Is doing that exercise?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have the books here. Yeah, I mean, Dan had been hanging out with the Committee, which is an improvisational theater group. So he was bringing improvisational theater techniques to our work. So we were all like learning how to do our craft, because we had to like hone our craft so that we could be good soldiers. And so everybody picked an artist that they felt affinity for. Mm-hmm. And then drew in that style. And the idea was, I mean, I can remember doing Popeye comic jams where I would do the first, I didn't usually, somebody else would do the first panel, and then I'd do the second, and then I'd do the third. So, and you'd make it look like, sort of like a Popeye comic. Mm-hmm. Cigar style Popeye. And and I picked H.T. Webster, who I grew up with his books here in the house. And I say, this is in the interview. I mean, my dad, I just found a picture of that my dad had of H.T. Webster and Claire Briggs, who both drew kind of similar styles. And my dad was hanging out with either H.T. Webster's mother or possibly his wife, I think. Oh, wow. Not so much the cartoonist, but just somewhere in Ohio, I think. And so it was like, this is, this was something I was like almost blood related to, but also the art style. It's the thing I like about your art style is it's like, it's realistic.
Mhm.
It's realistic. I mean, I have to say, in this book, this is Sarah's book, and it's so full of art. It's like, it's so amazing. And this is not off the subject. I'm not just plugging something here, but it's like if you look at this, it's like every single panel is a
I'm gonna open your
painting.
book.
It's, I don't, and I want to find out how you do that, because I'm just impressed by it. But that's the kind of feeling that I have when I look at H.T. Webster too. I just go like, how did he do that? It's art, he drew it, but it looks real to me.
Well, that's the feeling I have when I look at your stuff too, especially like I've like wrote down all these things. Like I want to talk to her about how she draws trees and also about but clothes. Like you're really good at drawing people wearing clothes. And
I can
it's
tell you something about
incredible. Yeah, please. I want your secrets.
Because, well, you know, I read a lot of books. I still read a lot of books, but I read initially, I read like the Lenny Bruce books. I found everything that Bill Malden ever wrote, who was the cartoonist who went to war. He was famous for doing G.I. Joe and doing, you know, just wonderful. I mean, he brought the war home with, this is World War II, brought it home through cartoons. And what he did was he leveled the thing between the GIs and the officers in it with his cartoons. You know how like you do this so well, you approach it gently, but you really can have an impact. And that's what Bill Malden did. But one of the things that Bill Malden did, he went to school at the Chicago, I think it was the Chicago Art Institute, and he vowed when he was there, he was going to teach himself to draw, and he was going to draw 10 cartoons every day. And he talks about the folds. He got really good at the folds in cloth, in people's clothes, just by practicing it.
And how did you practice that? When you went to art school as well, right? In Seattle. Did you do a lot? Was it like a kind of realism based school where you did a lot of drawing from the figure?
The commercial art school, where if you were really good, you could end up laying out ads for Yellow Pages ads for the phone company.
Oh,
If you
wow,
were
you
really,
still have a job today if you had done
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
well, I'm glad you did cartooning instead. But really, like, how did you like?
I didn't like cartoonists.
No, my art school didn't like cartoonists either. At some point, I remember we were supposed to draw these big figure drawings because we did a lot of drawing from the figure. It's very traditional art school, Boston University. And at one point, I was like, I don't want to draw big. I want to draw small. And that was before I even thought of doing comics, but I just had this feeling like I wanted to draw the figures small. My teacher was like, what are you doing? Like, this looks like comic books. Like, this is not what we do here. And I was like, but I like it. Why? But yeah.
That'll learn them.
What's that?
That'll learn them.
Oh, someone, Dale wants to know which art school in Seattle did you go to?
The Burnley School of Commercial Art. And I think I got some sort of federal money because my father was in the military. So,
well, they at least taught you about lettering, because your lettering, and I know you talk about this in the interview, but like every title is like its own little work of art. Like it's like sign painting kind of lettering, and just your lettering in general.
That's Gary Halgren, the sign painter.
Yeah.
The one who changed Seattle with Doug Fast with his signs. He taught me I don't know. I mean, he just showed me how to do that. He showed me how letters were built, and then I just went through books. I have a book, 101 Alphabets, and I would look at that, or I would collect things, and just it was a sort of a Zen moment when I'd start a strip to just get into the mood of it.
Mm-hmm. And so you would start with the title and then go from there.
Well, I didn't write it that way, but art-wise, you know, that the title would be the first thing I did. I don't know. I just felt it was fun, I guess. It was fun.
Yeah, I feel like I learn a lot looking at your lettering. Lettering has always been hard for me. Both of my books, they're done with a font. It's a font made for my handwriting, but it is not hand lettered. And it's something that I really, really want to be able to do. But whenever I try to letter, it just, my handwriting is bad. But a friend of mine who's also a cartoonist said that like you have to think of lettering as drawing. The letters, you know, it's not just writing, that the letters are drawing. And in your lettering definitely looks like it's as drawn as all of your figures, as, you know, anything else in the strip. So I really appreciate that.
It's Ray Collins, who was a Seattle cartoonist who worked for one of the Seattle papers here, Ray Collins.
Mhm.
And he just showed us how to improve your lettering. There's two things, but he said you write fools, the word fools, over and over again, because that's every stroke you need to practice.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a joke on me though. I'm writing fools down.
And the other thing, I hope I don't have this backwards. I think that, and there are people probably visiting here who know this. The downstroke should be thin and the horizontal stroke should be thicker.
Mm.
And I don't know why that is. And it's not really something that I go for in my balloon lettering, because I just go for like trying to get the spelling right in the balloons. But well, when I was first trying, you know, people, you know, they draw lines and they try to keep within the lines. And and once you do that stuff long enough, though, you develop, you grow the neural pathways that you need, and then you don't have to work so hard on it. A lot, I think, don't you find that a lot of cartooning is practice, just practice?
Oh yeah, because you have to get to a point where it just is like you're in the flow and you're not even thinking about it anymore. So, but it takes a long time to get there. Like right now for me, because the book that I'm working on now is about the environment, I'm trying to get better at drawing trees. And that's something that I noticed in this book a lot. And I wonder if it relates to being in Seattle, but you have a lot of trees in the background and like they're really beautifully done, especially like, sorry, this is not safe for work. None of the book is safe for work, by the way. But look at like the whole strip here is, you know, about this photo shoot with this guy, but like the backgrounds are beautiful. And you know, you didn't have to do that. Like there's the mountains and there's this snowy trees, and like the strip could have been just, you could have ignored all of that, but you really pay attention to your backgrounds and to the environments that your characters are in. I think this looks like very Seattle.
Oh yeah, that's Discovery, the beach at Discovery Park. There's a lighthouse down there and the sewage treatment plants down there too.
Yes.
That's that same beach.
Do you do a lot of drawing on location when you were working on these strips? No.
I did that in San Francisco.
Mm.
I just, you know,
That's just from memory.
Magnolia is burned into my brain. Yeah.
Wow, so you have an incredible visual memory then, to be able to like just pull that out.
Conceivably, because I also draw my junior high school, and I remember what that looks like. Yeah, you know, it's like painful snapshots of various places.
Well, I wanted to ask you, like, what kind of sketchbooks did you keep? And did you ever do any drawing from life or drawing from the figure? Or this is just like...
I did life drawings in school. We did get to, you know, that was okay. You know, I had one of my sketchbooks. I have some other ones that, but this is a sketchbook. This is from 1974. And here's this, I don't know, there's it's Doc and Merle Watson playing.
Oh, wow.
That's because I don't drink much. So what I do is I go and these were great because they fit into my purse. And so I would just sit and draw, and it makes you, I'm not sure if this works for everybody, but not drinking and not doing drugs, it makes you kind of popular around people who are doing them, because they can kind of trust that somebody, you know, has a little bit of self-control going. But yeah, I just, bisexual is when you do it with more than one person. So I just make notes. This was sort of Indians were so far out, you know, it's like he's making, I don't know, it's, you know, we have this sort of a Native American thing here in Seattle, you know, and I'm sorry that I did that. I think that's the woman. I think that's the wife who's being made to paddle. And that was my comment, because I'd actually camped out with the Native Americans who were protesting. This is in 1969. They were protesting a logging company taking some of their land, and they wanted it back. And I stayed there until this, you know, okay, here's the thing. It's like, there are these movement people, and then same thing happened to you with, I think it was in the Hasidic community, and you're going like, here's this nice guy, you know, and he's going to help me, and he's talking to me, and then all of a sudden he's going to grab your boob. And so like that, this is Men Are Men, that one piece of art in there, but it's, you know, it's private. I didn't publish that.
Yes.
You can tell, you know, I'm a little weirded out, but I didn't even know what I would be turning to on that page. I just like drew weird stuff in my sketchbooks.
Well, the other thing you talk about in the interview at the end of your book here is that the writing and the concept for your strips often took a lot longer than your drawings. And I really identified that with that, because that's the same for me. Like, the writing takes so long, and, you know, the drawing is kind of like, okay, now I get to do the fun part. But with those sketchbooks, would you just, because you say that all of these strips are really like kind of autobiographical in a way, like they come from things that are happening in your life or things that you were thinking about. How did you collect those ideas? Did you put them in your sketchbook, and then you would kind of like say, what am I going to write about today? I'll use this old idea. Or was it more like, all right, you just know what you're going to write about that month and you go with it?
Okay, so I talked to some Saturday Night Live writers one time, and it's like, it's the craziest thing about your life, because they had a weekly deadline to come up with stuff, and then they had to sit in a room and compete with ideas with a whole bunch of other people. So there's that. And it's, you know, how do you write as a professional, you know, because when you're not doing it, when you're just doing it whatever you want to do, you can just, I don't know, people have different ways of writing, and I'm going to ask you about yours. Mine turned out to be, I work really hard on the basic part of the writing. Lampoon used to come to me and say, well, we're doing an issue on love, you know, and so that's the theme, you know, can you do 2 or 3 pages about that? And there was a time when even more so, what was it that how did I end up doing that? I ended up doing a strip where I asked a woman that I met, I said, what do you think is the most important thing about a gay couple raising children? I don't think I said 2 women raising a child. I think I just said, what happens? And she said, it's their gender identity. And that was back in like the early 80s. When she told me that, and I ended up doing 4 pages about that theme. And so when you're a professional, you you find a way to come up with something. And I also found that I wasn't really very good at doing, I don't even know what you call, maybe it's satire. It's the thing you do when you make fun of someone. Like
Mhm.
I liked Bette Midler, and I wanted to do a strip about Bette Midler. And I'm like, I have nothing bad to say. I have nothing funny to say about her. I can't write about her because I don't, there's just nothing there. So does that sort of answer your question?
Yes, it does. I'm sorry. My brother's dog is in here, Charlie.
Oh,
And I don't know if you can hear
no, you
Charlie.
can compare dogs.
Yeah. Charlie, can you come up here? Come up here. Come up here. Come up here.
Teddy,
Oh,
come here,
he's
Teddy.
too far down. Sorry. This is very professional. Charlie, go away. Go away. Okay, he's going away.
So I write, I'll sit down and write, how do I feel about love?
Mhm.
Right. And I'll write, 10 pages and with just in a notebook of by hand what I feel about. And sometimes I'll just start out and go like, I don't want to do this. And then I'm like, oh yeah, but I have to, and it's like people are always forcing you to think about love, and I just, why do we care so much about love? And then I'll just sort of riff in my head and on paper. And usually by the time I get to the end of writing about that, I'll have an idea for a story. It's really cool. And so once I do that, then I have the progression of events. So the story will be, beginning, middle, and end. So I'll take my thing about somebody who doesn't want to have anything to do with love, and then like just say you're going to do this, that they're just confronted with hearts and flowers and people wanting to hug them all day, and they can't get away from love, and so that there's a natural progression to that. And then you just you turn it into either your scene or your dialogue. It's writing a movie, and then you break down the panels, and if you're lucky, you get to choose how many panels you do, or you have to restrict it to your 9-panel layout like you did here.
Mhm.
So, but it's very mechanical in a sense.
Yeah.
And that's good because that's the craft part of what we do. And
Yeah.
I was looking up, okay, I just have to say this because it's so cool. I was looking up the studio, the warehouse that the Air Pirates were in San Francisco. We were in one and then we moved to another. We moved from Harrison Street to Folsom. And we were in the studio, we were in the warehouse that used to be the Zoetrope warehouse, where Francis Ford Coppola owned it, and he still owned it, and we kind of rented it from him. And so I was looking for pictures of the studio, and I found this video of Francis Ford Coppola in the same warehouse where we had worked, and he's being interviewed for TV, and all he can talk about is how cool his equipment is. He's just going, look at this. You can just cut stuff. People used to cut on little teeny things, and we've got this great big thing. And he just goes from one room to the next and just shows them like what great. And even his espresso machine, he's going like, yes, I got the first espresso machine in San Francisco. It's huge thing. But the cool thing is he's just about to make this movie, The Conversation, with Gene Hackman, like his.
Love that movie.
And he's talking about George Lucas just having made THX 1138. But what he's talking about is the craft part of what he does. There's some a little bit just very optimistic things about making movies and how he wanted to bring in all these other filmmakers and support filmmakers. It's really beautiful, and it really typifies I still feel that way. And that was what we were like. All of us were like that, even the little people that didn't become zillionaires.
Yeah, I think like all of us cartoonists just kind of want to talk about the craft, right? Like, and I know I hesitate to ask too much about that in a Q&A like this because I like don't want to bore people who don't care about that stuff. But I don't know. It's what I want to know. It's like, what kind of nib did you use? What kind of paper did you use? And like, really, I'm very interested in you using the iPad now and Procreate. And like, don't you miss your old tool? Look at that.
This is my drawing board.
Wow.
This is my drawing board from art school.
Wow.
And it's hollow core, it's very light, and it's 18 by 24. I can't even fit it on here. And I've taped it up with a bunch of graphic stuff. This is what you don't need when you work on the iPad Pro with Procreate.
So do you lean that against a table and then draw like that?
Yeah, and you can do it in bed. You know, it's because if you're not at a slant, the ink, if you draw with a dip pen, I don't know if you use a dip. Do you use a dip pen?
I do, yeah.
You know how like if you turn your hand upside, are you right-handed?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So left-handed people are even more crippled by that, by having the ink drip out of the dip pen. Yeah. So, but this keeps that from happening. You know, if this was just flat, if you're just drawing that, you'd have big blurbs of ink all over, and then you'd have big blurbs of whiteout. So,
Wait, how does the slant keep you from dripping ink? Because this is a
well,
problem.
because you're tilting. I'm trying to. You're tilting your arm up, so you're dipping. You're dipping here.
I see. Yeah.
With your pen, and then I'm trying to see if I have my pen here too. Aren't we fascinating?
Well, we're getting a lot of comments that everybody wants to hear this stuff, and they're not going to be bored, and they're reading it.
So here's the quilt with the Hunt's 101 fleur-de-lis point, and it's got this plastic thing so it keeps your fingers from getting calloused and hurting and getting blistered. So you're working like this. So this fleur-de-lis point holds a lot of ink. That's why it's a good thing. So you're working like that. And so if I was working like, turning it upside down or working with it flat, just I'd press down and all the ink would blow up out.
That is what happens to me. I like to work flat because I like to be really, really close to the paper. Like whenever I try to work on a slanted table, I'm like, I'm too far away. So that's my problem.
Well, maybe try a drawing board. They're hard to come by though now.
I have one actually. I found it on the street in Brooklyn.
Oh,
very lucky. Maybe I just need better glasses.
No, whatever you're doing the right thing, let me tell you. And having said that, because you're doing watercolor on every panel, and I like working on this. Do you ever work on this?
I just started using a Winsor and Newton watercolor paper. I had to special order it, and it's awesome. But
this is a block.
Yeah.
So you don't have to stretch the paper to keep it from burbling up. So
what do you have there? Can we see that?
This is an illustration that I did for a story that somebody else wrote that was in American Bystander. It's about aliens coming to Earth, and after Earth has just destroyed itself by paving everything over. And the aliens come and they think that all the skyscrapers are just headstones.
God, that's amazing.
It's a really good story. Yeah.
What kind of watercolor do you use?
Well, funny that you asked that.
Emily Flake, I also feel like a fraud. So, oh wow. The highest quality, most expensive materials.
It held up. It's held up. All the stuff that I've done. I'm just lazy.
Is that the same for the color stuff in your book too?
I think so.
Wow.
I think so. I don't think I've not spent much time because I wasn't doing it for the ages.
Yeah.
I was doing it for print. All it had to do was make it to the printer. But I was shocked when I used markers too for the artwork that's in there. And I was shocked when I pulled it out and it was in as good shape as it was. It was amazing.
Wow, praying.
Yeah. Everything, the bad part of all that stuff is either that you have to scan it and break up your line and screw up your color on your scanner, or in Photoshop, or when it's photographed. If it's not photographed perfectly, it washes out. It's all that mechanical connection between the original art and then the mechanics that come in between getting it into the, the eye of the viewer, on a magazine page or wherever.
So you had a pretty complicated process for making the color strips where you would do your line work, get it printed on like a clear film, and then light box your watercolors, right? Am I getting that?
Yes, it started in art school, so they did teach me something handy. And I don't know what they were trying to tell me. I think maybe to keep the black line to hold up. They taught me a lot of like really cool artsy techniques sometimes. It was like being in like kindergarten or something to play with the colors. But so you would have a board and you would have your color, and then you'd have your clear film, and you did the black line on the clear film. I do that when I teach classes with the kids, because we do it. We just take illustration board and they do a little drawing, and they do their painting, and then they put clear film over it, and they use their Sharpie, and they do their black line with the Sharpie on it, and it looks so good. They look like animation cells. It's quite satisfying to do that, because even if you did like a real sloppy color job, it looks good when you put the black line over it.
Yeah.
So that was basically what I was doing, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. And the first time I did it, I took watercolor paper and I stretched the watercolor paper with water, and you have to get special tape, mailing tape. You can get wet and slap that down, and then it dries, and then you. So I was doing that over the black line, and I couldn't really see the black line, and it's a lot of didn't work very well. So then I started to, and then I used a light table doing that, but I had to have, but if I used watercolor paper that had fiberglass in it, I didn't have to stretch it. I didn't have to get it wet, so it naturally would not buckle.
Oh.
So there's a picture of me in the book, and I think I'm wearing like yellow, like house cleaning gloves, because I didn't want to get the fiberglass on my hands. It was tough.
Yeah, you're wearing gloves.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought those aren't just like weird hands.
It really hurt. And underneath that, the black line was underneath that paper. And I had to have the light table so I could see the black line and color it. It worked, but I'm in heaven with Procreate on the iPad now, because it just made all that go away.
People are interested in a Procreate demo, and I don't think we can do that now because you're on your laptop, but that might be something to consider for social media. Just saying a Procreate, you can make a little animation of like you working on a drawing, right? Like, I think you should put that on Twitter. But the reason I asked you about the process is that when you were finished with a strip, whether it was in color or black and white, did you just mail the original from wherever you were?
I love
National Lampoon?
Yes, mailed it, sometimes put it on a Greyhound bus.
What?
The original art, yeah. Because we were always working up to the last minute. And and a Greyhound bus could, like when I was in Florida, it would get it from where I was in Florida to New York, in a day.
Is there a person on the Greyhound bus taking it for you, or you just like
you just have
told them it'll be on this bus, go pick it up?
Cardboard, and you wrap it up, and it's like mailing something. I don't know whether people still do that, but there was that, and sometimes you could FedEx it, or mail it.
Weren't you afraid that something like these are your babies? Did any of them ever get lost on the way? No,
and what they told me at the post office back in the 80s in New York was, somebody told me that when they brought the Mona Lisa to the United States to tour in museums, they sent it via the post office because it was the safest way to do it. Because FedEx doesn't, if you want to insure it through FedEx, they'll only insure the materials. So the value of the paper is what's insured. They don't respect artwork, or they didn't back then.
Wow. Oh yeah, I didn't realize it's already like after 10. If you have a question, you can write it in the chat or in the Q&A, and there's some questions here. Can you tell us how many strips you left out of the book? I also watched your talk with Emily Flake and was surprised that she referred in her written intro to a strip about masturbation that you left out.
The masturbation strip is in print this week in the American Bystander.
Oh, great.
With an explanation by me about how it's educational. It is. It's like nobody, I mean, I put a strip in National Lampoon about a woman masturbating. I mean, that was, but the reason it's not in the book is because I'm a prude. Let's just say that. I just, the book's more permanent, you know. I did things in the magazine and it went out and in theory got the covers ripped off and got returned to the publisher. It just was, it was transient, and I love publishing, and I really like that aspect of publishing, that it didn't last. So
yeah, that's something that we don't have today with the internet.
yeah.
And you said that National Lampoon really was just into whatever you did, but they rejected a strip about the ozone layer in Hairspray.
Yes.
They're like, more sex, please.
I'm trying to think if that's in the book. Is that in? I don't know. We might not have thought it was funny enough because it was, yeah. Just.
Yeah, someone says, I recall a strip where Pepsi is kind of the ruler of a sci-fi landscape with men in cages. I didn't see that one. Did that get cut from the book, or I wouldn't have forgotten that? Do you know which one he's talking about?
Unless it was Thelma Iron-Thighs, who was, Pepsi would dream that she was Thelma Iron-Thighs. And it might have been, yeah, I just, you know, I don't, there were, I'm sure I probably did it. I don't remember it though. You know,
I really need to see that one now.
Yeah. I didn't remember all the strips that I had. Right? When I pulled them out and looked at them, I was like, oh, that's pretty good.
Were Pepsi and Bonnie both sides of you, do you think? Or do you not think of them that way? They're their own characters. They have nothing to do with you.
No, Bonnie's like me. I'm slow.
I identify with Bonnie too.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well,
I want to be a Pepsi, but I'm not.
I think Pepsi's not really analytical. Pepsi is from the gut. So her responses are just instant. And Bonnie is still learning, you know, she needs help from everybody, the dog. And I'm like that. I don't respond, you know. I was like, somebody said something to me the other day. Oh, they said, well, I saw you were in the newspaper. Everybody gets their 15 minutes of fame. And I'm like,
wow.
I'm like, what should I say to her? I think she's trying to be nice.
Is she?
Trying to be nice? Why did she say that? You know, it's like Pepsi would have had no problem.
Yeah, I do envy that. I
Yeah.
wish I could be more like Pepsi in that way.
Yeah, it's a 20/20 hindsight thing. Only it's instant 20/20 hindsight.
Yeah. But through your strip, you get to have that side of you that has the snappy answers and knows exactly what you're saying. It's just through somebody else.
Yeah, she functions as I don't know, she brings things. She's really good at ranting. So I don't like, I'm not sure that you could tell from that notebook, but there's a lot of ranting in my notebook about stuff. Well, like,
Mhm.
like the Indians, like they make the, the back to the land movement was like that. The back to the land movement is really great for the guys because they get to go out and like hunt and, build things. And the women are out like, digging in the garden and they do all the grunt work, take care of the kids. Well, I mean, taking care of kids is a privilege, but I don't know whether I'm being clear or not about that, but Pepsi will take those attitudes
Mhm.
and go on at length about them.
Yeah.
Sometimes with her clothes off. So I don't know. I was
John wants to know, was there any blowback about the sexual nature of Trots and Bonnie at the time? Especially since, they're supposed to be 13. They're doing, they're not acting like 13-year-olds in a lot of these strips. So did you get any angry letters about that?
times have changed.
Mhm.
They've really changed. When I was 15 years old, my boyfriend was 20 and my parents didn't mind. He used to pick me up in the morning and take me to high school and bring me home. And
Mhm.
nobody said anything about it. And it was a different world in terms of that kind of consciousness. I mean,
Mhm.
parenting is completely different now. And the world's gotten harder and ickier. I mean, I know that bad stuff was going on, but what we saw was the Disney version of what it was like to be 13 or Mickey Mouse Club or any of the, Annette and it was Annette Funicello and her boyfriend on
Mhm.
the beach. And that's all we were seeing. We weren't seeing, and there was so much, there was this constant current of shame. And I just wanted to go after that, and just give it some daylight. And so that's mainly what I was doing. And now I would say, I mean, I did not analyze my characters back then the way I do now in terms
Mhm.
of what is their purpose. But they're avatars. They're like in the Peanuts comic strip, which I grew up with, the children in the Peanuts comic strip are not children. They're avatars for adults dealing with adult kind of circumstances. I mean, that was written for adults, I think.
Mhm.
And certainly during the 50s when I started reading it, that's what Peanuts was about. So it's not really unusual to and they're comic characters. They're not real kids, even if they're only comic characters, but they're not even really comic characters. They're avatars for talking about other things like exploitation.
Mhm. Well, and they also change with the times. Like I think you talk in the commentary in the back of the book, but in the 90s, or like around the time when AIDS became an issue, they're talking about, well, no one's having sex anymore, and it's a different world. There's not as much freedom in that stuff, and I think that's reflected in some of those later strips that you know these characters also have to deal with that and the changes that brings to relationships with other people.
They did. They grew, and if they were around now, they would be dealing with a whole other world. Although they would be dealing with tattoos and piercings.
Are you tempted to bring them back
Not,
for a reunion? The TV shows do that. Why not comics?
I don't know. There are a lot of other things I want to be doing, so that's not top of the list to do that. I would
Yeah.
have to do another book.
Well, actually, someone was asking up in the chat if you've ever thought about writing for film or TV as one of
I,
your next projects.
I have written for film. The nice thing about I'm a member of the Writers Guild, so but if you write for film, you get paid a lot of money whether it gets produced or not. So
Right.
there's that. some people just make a whole career out of writing things that never get produced. And yeah, that's fun to do. And I don't know, have I ever thought about doing it or done it? I did it. I've written several movies and television. I wrote a little bit of television stuff that didn't get produced, but it was fun to do. So
oh, John also wants to see Trots and Bonnie animated, which I would love to see.
thank you. Go for it.
Yeah. Oh, Andrew wants to know, what movies and TV did you write? Or I guess you were saying that it wasn't actually produced, but.
Well, there was one movie that was produced. It was, I'm trying to think of I think it's called National Lampoon's Movie Madness. I was one of 5 writers on that. And it didn't, I get residuals of like $35 a year.
Nice.
From it, yeah. And that was back when a lot of there was a lot of Lampoon movie making going on, and so there was that. And I wrote a movie called Silicon Valley Guy, which was okay. So there was Valley Girl, the song, and then there was Silicon Valley Guy, the book. I think there were even more layers than that. And I ended up writing the movie for people who had got the rights to Silicon Valley Guy about computers. And I wrote several versions of it too, and it's quite funny. And I've written a few other things.
Can you is that yours? Can you release that if you wanted to, as just like the screenplay? Where is it now? I want to read it.
You know, if you wait long enough, people die. So to read it, because I didn't write it in a computer. It's on paper. I have it. I have all my versions and stuff. They were really pretty, they were really pretty funny, although it was sort of based on the book. Mm-hmm. The producers kept going like, you should have the characters go to Japan, because they wanted to go to Japan. And I'm like, okay, I'll try to fit that in. And it was a love story. It was sort of a Romeo and Juliet with computers. And it was different. Computers were different when it was written. It was in the 80s that I wrote it. So the technology was, yeah.
Mike wants to know, do you ever sell your original art? It appears that you weren't, since you had the originals to be rephotographed for the book. Do you ever consider that?
Yeah, there is talk of having a show.
Yeah.
And I think that the fact COVID has really sort of messed that up, but I'm preserving it. I'm preserving the original art as best I can.
Andrew also wants to know, what are you working on or want to be working on right now? What's next for you?
Well, I am doing a 5-page story about the environment. So I guess we're about Seattle in the environment, for Joyce Farmer's book about global warming, and she asked me to do that, and I'm doing it on the iPad. So it's really fun to do it. And I have like a whole bunch of projects that are just sort of going like, do me. And right now I'm doing this. I'm doing stuff like, creating the book plates, things like that takes time.
Yeah. Do you have some kind of internet presence, like an Instagram or a blog, where you put some of this stuff where people can see some of what you're working on, some of the videos that you've made of the comics from the book, maybe?
Yeah, I think since I have a real publicist, I have to run everything through Nick.
Yeah.
And But so that's the case with the videos. Maybe he's going like, well, hold off for a while, you know. And but I'm on Instagram at Trots and Bonnie, and I have pictures of my dog a lot on Instagram. Come on up, come on up, come on up, come on up, come on up. There you go.
Oh,
So, yeah, he's like, get out, stop working. So can I ask you, just before it's too late, I want to ask about how you're doing a very long story about traveling. How are you capturing that? And then,
oh, I just take a lot of notes and a lot of pictures. And for rolling blackouts, I recorded everything. So all of that dialogue was from like a little digital recorder that I had.
really?
And I transcribed it all and then cut stuff out from there. Yeah.
And then you use your photo reference?
Yeah, I took a lot of photos, especially for that book, because it was places that I knew I wouldn't be able to find on, like, Flickr, which for the Israel book, everything, like, there was a lot of stuff that I used Flickr for. But yeah, not a way I would recommend working. But
no, why not? Sounds good to me. And so how long does it take you to do like a page or how many?
Well, I'm kind of like you in that the writing and like conceptualizing and kind of editing things down took a really long time. Like for Rolling Blackouts, that was like 3 years. And then writing a script, I kind of work from a script, and then the drawing part also takes a long time, but just doesn't feel like a long time because drawing is fun, and especially painting is fun. Like, I don't know, for you, is painting more fun than drawing?
Well, are you doing, wait, I have to ask you these questions. So do you do like, are
No.
you doing like an entire page, or do you break up the are you doing the panels on the page?
Yeah, well, I would do a whole page, with the panels. But yeah, just go page by page, and that's it. It's been so long.
Do you work much larger than, or you said you like to work small?
They're like the size of your book, kind of. Like, I work large enough that it'll fit into a scanner.
Oh, okay.
Not any larger than that.
So is that a 8.5 by 11, or is that 11 by 4? What is it? 11 by 17?
I had these like pieces of watercolor paper that I just like cut down. I don't even remember what size they are. They're all different sizes because I would just like get one of those big sheets of watercolor paper and then cut it down. But they're all kind of like a little bit off. And like, I don't know, the grids are kind of off just because I like lightbox a template and then lightbox the
really?
lightbox thing.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not very precise.
Whatever you're doing, it's so people need to know that you were like my total first pick of someone to do this, especially this in Seattle, but to talk to you. I love your work. So and your books are phenomenal. I hope you do something where I can I could just call you up and ask you a bunch of questions because I want to find out more about what you're working on. It's really
anytime.
Really. And this, I think you should send this to Jill Biden now. I think that would be really informative. And she's a teacher, so she's going to get why this very clearly written story that's so even-handed, you managed to just really, it's so good.
Thank you. I haven't read that book for 10 years, so I don't even remember.
It's totally relevant now.
Relevant. I'm going to deflect now because I told you this is what I was going to do if you asked me questions about myself. If anyone else has questions, because it is getting late, a lot of people are saying thank you for an amazing interview. Yeah, a lot of people are, thanks everybody. Do you have any more questions? There's a lot of people just like kind of chiming in to thank you for being here.
They love you. Right. Oh, this is good. Okay.
Yeah, I can't believe like how fast the time went by. Is Rick around? Rick, are you there?
Rick is here. Rick is here.
Are.
For all know that YouTube have been so wonderful to watch. The regard and rapport you both have, and whenever we can do something like this again, and in person wouldn't be bad either. But because I think
Yeah.
that would also be pretty infectious in a way. And when we can go back to saying infectious and mean something positive, that kind of feeling that you get where you all feel enlarged and enlivened by the two of you. This has been great because it's talked about how both of you work and what all has gone into this work, what went into it. Back
Everybody
in the day.
needs to go get this book.
Yeah, and
So good.
yes, and
It's
great.
beautiful.
Bye, Emily. Bye, Emily.
Emily has been part of it, who chimed in with a question and wrote the introduction and has played other parts. And also, I mentioned she was here the other day. Kelly Fro, who with Short Run here in Seattle, has been watching and
Love Kelly.
yeah, part of Sarah's old loop of people here as well. So these are all part of hopefully getting Sarah. And we've been holding up How to Understand Israel, and there's of course Rolling Blackouts by Sarah Glidden, and the one and only incomparable Trots and Bonnie. Thank you both, and thank you everyone. It is getting late in the night for a Thursday night. Thank you so much, and Shary, for this and for the beautiful book. So
Thank you.
yes,
This is fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 We should
okay,
do another one.
we
I
will.
still have more questions for you. Can't believe we ran out of time.
Yeah. Well, that's the tell when you lose track of time this way, and no one felt, except for the East Coast people, I think, starting to get a little bit late in the night. Everyone's felt pretty. Actually, people are having trouble going to sleep. They're wired up now after this. I mean, have good luck with your travels there, Sarah. We're visiting family and all that too. So take care, both of you and everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Shary, so much for being here. And yeah, we can talk shop whenever you want.
Great. Let's talk soon. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks everybody
Nice
for
meeting
being
you.
here.